Hello everyone. As everyone had requested the recipe for the burger buns, here is a video recipe. I thought this time I would click a video and hopefully share it with everyone, because obviously visuals are always appealing and it helps people understand how the recipe is actually done. So let's go over the ingredients at first. So the very first thing is obviously maida. I have made it with 100% all-purpose flour. So I've taken 3.5 cups. If you would like, you could make a half and half of all-purpose as well as wheat flour, but obviously they won't be as soft as the all-purpose flour one. So that's that. Next, I have around 1.5 cup of water. Now we may or may not require all the water. It depends on how well the dough forms, and the dough needs to be firm. So it depends on what kind of maida you're using. Obviously, if you are planning to do half and half of maida as well as wheat flour, I would suggest you would require this much amount or probably a little more water, since the mixture would be quite dense. Next up is the salt. Salt is 1 teaspoon here. Then I have 3 tablespoons of olive oil. You can use any vegetable oil or any other oil for that matter. I prefer using olive oil. Then I have around 3 tablespoons of sugar. This is granulated sugar. It's very fine. If you don't have a fine version, I would suggest you use caster sugar. Next is the yeast. I am using instant yeast. This is not active dry yeast. This is instant yeast. So I don't need to activate this. I can directly use it in a dough. If you are planning to use active dry yeast, I will explain the steps further. This is around 12 grams of instant yeast. I also have 2 tablespoons of milk and a tablespoon to 2 of sesame seeds. These are only for brushing and topping the buns. They are not a part of the bun itself. So the recipe is quite simple, especially if you're using instant yeast. I would like to go about the active dry yeast first for my users, whoever would be using active dry yeast. I would suggest not to take 1.5 cups of water, rather taking 1 cup of water and taking half cup of milk. The half cup of milk, you can take it separate. Add in all the sugar to the milk and dissolve it. Make the milk a little warm, not hot. You don't want to kill your yeast, so you make it a little warm, which is say around 5 to 10 seconds in the microwave, or just a little heat on the stove. Don't make it hot. If you put your finger in and you feel it's hot, that means it's not right. It should just be very warm, basically how a tap water, normal warm tap water would feel. You would dissolve your active dry yeast into that mixture and you would let it froth. Say it would take around 10 to 15 minutes. Once it's frothy, then you can mix all the dry ingredients into your mixing bowl or your stand mixer, and then finally add the frothy mixture. In my recipe, since I'm using the instant yeast, I will start the recipe now and show you how it goes. So first I would be adding the 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour into my stand mixer. My recipe is for a stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you need not worry. You can mix all the ingredients on a clean kitchen platform, and you can knead the dough on your platform, but using a stand mixer obviously makes things easy. So next I will be adding around 12 grams of the instant yeast, and then the sugar, which is 3 tablespoons. Sugar is quite optional in this, but obviously sugar leads to a very soft and fragile structure of the bread. If you omit the sugar, it won't be an issue. The taste still remains quite similar. It'll just be a little less sweet. Also, I'm adding the 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, one tip that I would like to give everyone is the fact that we should never add a lot of salt to our bread mixture. Salt doesn't allow our yeast to grow, so I'd suggest you guys don't use more salt. The lesser the better, but obviously we need a little salt for flavor. So that's about it. And now I would put up the hook for my stand mixer. and I would switch on my stand mixer and let it mix. So I'm letting it mix a bit. This not only helps to mix the ingredients but also hydrates the mixture. Also a fact that I had sieved this flour beforehand. Sieving also aerates the mixture, it keeps in air. So now as you can see, all of these have been lightly mixed. Now I'll be adding in the water. Usually a lot of people just add all the water, but I don't prefer adding all the water. So I'll add around, say, 1/4 to half of what quantity we have, as we may not require all the water. I would let it bind and blend and see how much more water I would require. And now I'm adding more water. I've almost added 3/4 amount of water, as much as I had. So on my stand mixer, I'm just doing it on a speed of 3 to 4, nothing more. So I'm adding the whole amount of water now because I feel that the mixture might be dry. So 1.5 cups has already gone in, and I'm turning on the stand mixer to see how it goes. As you can see, most of the mixture is getting incorporated. As you can see, most of the mixture has been incorporated. Now if the whole flour is not getting incorporated, I would just suggest you put in your hand and mix it, just a quick mix with your own hand. No need to knead it in particular, it's just to grab all the dry flour around. Most of it has been grabbed in my stand mixer, but if not, as you can see, I'm just lightly mixing it around in the bowl, and that's about it. And now I would let it knead for another, say, another minute or 2 or 3 seconds. Now another quick tip that I would suggest is the fact that you do not add the fat, or any fat for that matter you're using in any bread. You do not add the fat from the start. You never add it from the beginning. A lot of recipes will show you that the fat can be added at the start. This kind of hinders the gluten formation in your bread. So the best is to knead the dough a bit, feel that it's become firm, and then in your final stages of like last 5 minutes of kneading, you could probably add in the oil and mix in completely. So the fat always goes last. If it's always the fat content goes at the end. In this case, like the oil, you can add at the extreme last, where you just have like, say, 5 to 7 minutes of kneading. I can understand not a lot of people can understand when the kneading needs to end, so I'll explain you that as well. Another minute or so on a very high speed, say around 4 to 5. Now I'm quickly going to add the oil, but I'm not adding all 3 tablespoons of oil. So I'm not adding the whole oil together at once. I'm just going to add more than half of it, say around 3/4 of it, and leave a little aside. I will show you why you would require that later. So now I've added the oil. Now on a very slow speed, because we just added oil. incorporated. You can just quickly grab any dough that's on the side of your bowl. Have a little sticking on the bottom. Now, as you can see, I have a very soft yet firm dough. It's pretty firm. Now, to test if your dough has already generated gluten, you do something which is called a window test. So you pull your dough like this and you see if it forms a window. Now I am shooting as well as pulling with both my hands, so apologies for the video being very awkward, but the gluten is still not being generated. So basically you have to oil your hands a bit, take a little bit of your dough and pull it with all your fingers slowly and see if it doesn't tear in the center and if it forms a nice window. Now, how do you see a window? You take the dough in front of a light or any light source in your kitchen and see if you can see through opaquely. If you can, that means your dough is ready. So my dough requires a little bit more of kneading, say another minute or two, and so let's see. Okay, so now I've pulled out my dough from the stand mixer and I've taken it on a clean kitchen counter. Now be sure that your counter is completely clean. It does not have any particles, food particles, because then that enters the bread. Also, I have taken the liberty to do the window test on the counter itself. So as you can see, there is this window. Now you can see this either in front of a light source or you can just spread it on your counter and see. Now, if this has been developed and it's not tearing even on pulling this much, that means your gluten has already been generated and your dough is perfect. Also, you should not have any lumps or anything in particular on the inside. If you have any residual particles of the yeast, it would be difficult for your dough to rise. So make sure everything's been incorporated super well. Now, we will have to knead the dough with our bare hands a bit, but be sure you're adding a little bit of olive oil or whatever oil you are using. Do not use flour. This is a common mistake which everyone does. They look at things that go on in the movies or like just videos, and they see a lot of flour, which is completely wrong. If your dough is sticky, you use oil. You do not use flour. So I have used oil. So remember, the remaining oil what we had, we will require it for doing this, which is kneading it on the counter. So this is just a little bit of kneading, and now what I will do is I'll press my whole dough down and I will pull in all my dough. I'm really sorry again, I'm doing it with one hand and shooting with the other, so it's not as perfect as it should be, but as you can see, so now I've joined all the ends and now I just flip it. Now if you see, this side is completely nice and smooth. Now I have to tighten this dough. Now how it works is you need both your hands here, mine is only one hand here, both your hands here, and you pull it towards you. This tightens the dough. Okay, so I will do it with both hands and tighten the dough. It should be such that it's firm to touch and it should spring back. So you can tighten it, put both your hands here and you pull it towards you with a little bit of edge of the dough on the edge of the surface, and you tighten the dough. So as you can see, now it's a nice round and firm dough. Now you can take any bowl, like any bowl you want, or you can take the same bowl in which you had taken the flour and you can just oil it a bit, just grease it just a bit so that the dough doesn't stick. So now I'm just greasing this from all the sides, guys. Please don't forget the sides. We need to grease the whole bowl. And I'm just gonna take my dough and place it in this. Now try to take a deep bowl. If you're taking a very shallow bowl, your dough will start coming out. So now at this bowl, exactly the recipe gives me half the dough in my bowl. So it's almost half the length. So I need this dough to double, so it should almost come till the top, or at least till the brim. So that's how I know how my dough rises. If not, you can take a bigger bowl as well. You just need to know how much. It should have doubled. It takes around half an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cling wrap this. I'm not going to apply any wet cloth, nothing. I'm going to just cling wrap this and keep it somewhere in the kitchen, which is a warm end. If you want right now, if you have not preheated your oven, which we haven't discussed, so you can keep it in the oven for now, but it should not be preheated. It's just a closed oven, just a closed and not switched on oven. You can just keep it in there after cling wrapping it. It should be cling wrapped, but not cling wrapped tight. It needs to be just cling wrapped to be covered, and you let it rise for at least half an hour to an hour until it doubles. Again, it depends on all your which place you stay at, how much humidity you have, how warm it is. It depends on all that. So yeah, say around half an hour to 45 minutes until it doubles, and then we are good to go. So I just cling wrap this and show this to you. Okay, so as you can see, I've cling wrapped this, but it's not tight, it's a little loose, but cover it completely. But we don't want to make this an airtight thing. We let the yeast breathe a bit because that's how it will grow. Sometimes it can get tricky. The yeast may or may not help you rise sooner. It may take longer. Also, when you are using the water, I would suggest you use room temperature water. Don't use very warm or hot water. Hot water is out of question. The yeast dies. We want the yeast to thrive. They thrive at a warm temperature, say 25 to 30. Anything above that just kills the yeast. So we don't need hot water. We need only normal warm water. Tap water is the best for this requirement because you get like normal temperature water. So now I'll keep this inside my oven, which is not switched on at all. I'll keep this inside my oven and let it rise for say around half an hour. Usually my dough rises in half an hour. Also, there's still a little bit of oil left. Don't discard this. We will need this. We might need more oil as well. It very much depends. So I have my milk, oil, and my sesame, which is left out, and everything else is being incorporated in the dough. So now the dough goes to the non-preheated, no heat oven, just in an oven so that it's in a warm place for half an hour. While the dough is resting, you need to give it good rest. What do? You have around half an hour, so obviously you can go and grab a cup of coffee, you can chill a bit. But before you go for that, I would suggest you would just line up your tray, whatever tray you're using. I prefer using aluminum trays because they give a good rise and they give an even heat. I'm using pan coating to coat the tray. You can use just regular oil. Just a suggestion not to use olive oil because it burns quite quickly. You can use any other oil. You can even use ghee if you want. This is just for sticking the parchment paper inside. So I'm just spraying it generously on the edges as well. And yeah, that's it. Now, another suggestion when you're doing this, the bread tends to burn if it's touching the baking tray directly. So I suggest you make a bigger square than your tray and you place it well within and you just press it in. And okay, I've done it with one hand, but ta-da! You have a perfectly lined square tray which will not have funny edges, and nor do you have to like cut it precisely. The extra stuff you can just trim it off if you want to. If not, in breads it doesn't matter that much, but if you are a perfectionist like me, just trim the edges off. Quick, easy, no shenanigan recipe. Obviously there is wait time because yeast. So, but yeah, as you can see, nicely lined square tray. It's lined on the sides as well. So we're ready. Now we can just keep this aside and let it be as is. Okay, so as you can see that the dough has completely risen and it has already become double and it's soft and it's filled with gas at the moment. So how do we degas this? Most of the videos that you would see online would show you that you would punch into the center to degas it. My personal suggestion and what I've learned is to pull out your dough from the bowl and then degas it. This way you don't lose a lot of air, you lose very little bit of air. So I am just pulling it out slowly, very slowly. So as you can see, it was greased well and it came out. You can see the gluten formation here. This is just, so now I have pulled out my dough and now I'm gonna just press it very gently to degas it. Don't press it too much. We don't want all the gas to go out, just the excess gas to leave. So I pulled off the excess which was on the bowl and I stuck it here. Now I would just roll it tightly, just make it a nice round cylinder. So now I have this cylindrical dough here. Now I'm going to use, this is basically a cake scraper, or you can use any metallic scraper. So you cut into the desired size you want. If you want perfect sized buns, you can also weigh the amount of dough you use. You can see the insides of the dough, how they are. Do not pull the dough out and break it. Cut it. So I've cut this piece using a scraper and now I'm going to press it down. As you can see, nicely press it, and then I'm going to take all the edges and bring them to the center, at least 4 to 5, and make it a nice shape like this. And now after this is done, I just flip it so I get a smooth end on the top. And now as you can see, this is like me holding something and I am rotating the bun. Now if your dough starts sticking like how it is right now, go ahead and use some oil like how we used earlier, but don't use too much, just a little, as much as is required. Now the heat of your hand will also cause the dough to stick, so be quick in your action and make it a nice tight dough ball. Okay, so since I'm shooting, I've not got a very clean end. If I do it properly, I would get a very nice surface which won't have a lot of these, as you can see, the bubbles. So you just keep rolling it until you get a very nice and smooth surface like how you have on the dough. Obviously it will not be completely smooth because it's a dough at the end of the day, but you should have a nice and clear. Okay, I've got something better. So now I'm just going to take this carefully and place it on one end of the tray. So this is how it's done. You can take the measurement of this and then round it, so that if you want the same size ones, you can just weigh each and every one you do. So you just take this little bit of oil and you roll it, flatten, bring in the sides. Now you need to make sure that you join these ends, otherwise when you're rolling it you won't have a firm base. Once that is done, you flip it, then you turn it. So as you can see, I've done 4 buns here. They're equally spaced. Now I'm going to keep this again in the non-preheated, non-switched on oven, just in a warm area to let them rise. This is the final proving or the final rise for these buns. These will also require probably around half an hour, but it very much depends on what your size is, because if your tin is small or your buns are big, within 15 to 20 minutes they should rise enough and you can just bake it. But it should be worthy a point that you use a proper tin which is not too small and you let them rise to their double, because that's when you get a nice texture on the inside. So I'll keep this back in the non-preheated oven and let them rise at room temperature. and once they're doubled, we'll pull them out and we'll preheat our oven to around 180 degrees Celsius, and then I'll show you the next steps. Alright people, so as you can see, after like say around 45 minutes, these have risen really well. They've come up to a perfect shape. Now I would just be using a pastry brush and I would be dipping it in milk, and I would be carefully yet generously brushing it with milk. Guys, you need to be careful. You cannot poke the buns with your brush. It needs to be very soft and gentle. If you poke it, you're going to release all the air, all the beautiful air that has been generated, the carbon dioxide that has been generated by the yeast. So I'll be generously brushing it carefully, all 4 of the buns. So yeah, that's how it's done. You would want to brush it until the sides so that you get an even color. Now I'll be pouring a little extra milk on the top because the milk seems to be running side, and immediately start sprinkling it with required amount of sesame seeds. My house people prefer a lot of sesame seeds, so I'm putting like a lot of them. You can put as much as you like, or you can skip this. You need not put sesame seeds on your buns, but since they're burger buns, obviously you would prefer to put. And that's about it. You want to press them a bit, but don't press them too much, just so that we know that these things are stuck. And now they're ready for the oven. 80 degrees, so I am putting the buns in slowly, steadily, right in the center of the oven. There we have it, and now I'll put it. The oven is preheated at 180 degrees for around 15 to 20 minutes. I have an oven thermometer, so I know what temperature it is at. So around 180 degrees. It takes around 15 to 20 minutes to bake. So you will come to know once they're ready. You can poke in a toothpick if you like, or you could just see they brown from the top and they're ready. Okay, so it's been almost 20 minutes and look at that beauty. The beautiful buns, they're ready. So as you can see, these are hard to touch on the top if you feel them immediately, but they are soft on the inside. So once they cool down completely, the top also tends to soften. Right now it's hard because we put in the milk to get the beautiful color. So that's how they are done. Now we're going to cool them down and then we will remove them. The beautiful color we have got on the buns. And now let's cut and show you how the insides are.